Welcome everyone to episode number 1000 of NoDQ Video. That's right, 1000 episodes. 6 years ago today, August 16th, 2011, was the very first edition of NoDQ Video. Back then, No DQ&A Video. Welcome everyone to No DQ&A Video number 1. 6 years later, I've gotten more animated. It's been an amazing ride over the past 6 years, and I got the props here, got the green balloon. We're having a great old time here on NoDQ.com, celebrating 1,000 episodes of NoDQ Video. With that being said, I got 20 questions today. Also, my top 10 biggest hits and misses in WWE history, and my proposed WrestleMania 34 card. Let's get started. It's time for episode number 1000 of NoDQ Video. Alright, first question of episode number 1000 comes from Patrick. I got a unique question. What was your very first wrestling memory? What was the first match you've seen, and what hooked you? My earliest wrestling memory was being in my crib, maybe 1 year old, 2 years old, somewhere around there. And I was very upset when I saw this picture my dad put up of Ox Baker. Ox Baker, for those of you that are not familiar with him, he was popular in the 1970s. He was bald, had thick eyebrows, scary looking dude. And he freaked me out when I was a baby. It gave me nightmares, pretty much. I was absolutely terrified by that photo of Ox Baker. He had the handlebar mustache. I could not even look at the picture. And I remember when we moved from our apartment to another one, my mom had the picture in the closet and I discovered it in the closet. And when that happened, my mom said enough's enough, and my dad ended up throwing out the picture because I was just too scared of it. So that's my earliest wrestling memory, and my first match was at the LA Sports Arena, 1987. It was Hulk Hogan versus Randy Savage as the main event. A couple of months before Savage officially turned babyface. This was right after WrestleMania 3. I remember being way up in the nosebleeds, but that show still stands out to me. And that was a very memorable time to get into wrestling, when Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage were feuding with each other. But that was before the whole Mega Powers feud and that whole storyline began, and I'll talk more about that later on in this video. What got me hooked on wrestling? It's really hard to say. I could not point to one specific wrestler or storyline because my dad was a huge fan growing up, and I was watching wrestling pretty much since birth. As long as I can remember, I was watching wrestling. So it's just something I grew up with from the very beginning, and I've been watching it as long as I can possibly remember. This question comes from SCW Wrestling Channel. Who was your favorite wrestler when you first started watching wrestling, and why? Congrats on NoDQ 1000. Thank you for that, SCW. Hulk Hogan. It would have to be Hogan. As a kid, I was a huge Hulkamaniac. I had all the Hulk Hogan merchandise, the figures, the wrestling buddy, the t-shirts, you name it. I was very much into Hulk Hogan. I cried when Hogan lost to The Undertaker at Survivor Series 91. I was really upset about that. But then again, I was only 9 years old at the time. Hulk Hogan was like my Superman or my Batman. He was my childhood idol. I looked up to Hulk Hogan. He was my superhero. He had to be my favorite. I also liked Randy Savage, of course, The Ultimate Warrior, Bret Hart, Hart Foundation, Rockers, Jake the Snake Roberts, and the list goes on. All the favorites during that period. I loved WWE wrestling back then. It was what I grew up with, and I just loved watching the shows. I was very entertained by them. This one comes from James. What are your favorite SummerSlam moments ever? Match, promo, or something else? I've been watching NoDQ since the beginning. Congrats on 1,000. Thank you for that. My favorite SummerSlam moment would have to be Shawn Michaels coming out of retirement to face Triple H. The moment, the storyline, the match itself, the angle they did after the match with Triple H taking out Shawn. Everything about that match I thought was fantastic. Shawn Michaels came back and they had such great psychology in that match, and the slightest moves, the most basic moves, like a backbreaker by Triple H to Shawn, because they had made such a big deal out of Shawn's back being bad, and going into that match, people were wondering, would Shawn get hurt again? WWE totally played up on this, and just a basic move like a backbreaker, I'm watching that and I'm cringing. I'm thinking, oh no, Shawn's really hurt. I mean, they did such a good job with that match. It was so convincing, so well done. They're masters. Shawn Michaels, Triple H, great storytelling, excellent storytelling, and that's one of my all-time favorite matches. So when I think of great SummerSlam moments, that has to be right up there. And that same show, Brock Lesnar winning his first world title, beating The Rock, another great SummerSlam moment. Going back earlier, SummerSlam 91, Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect, another one of my favorite moments. A lot of Bret Hart moments in those early SummerSlam years. I like to think of Bret Hart as Mr. SummerSlam. If Shawn Michaels is Mr. WrestleMania, Bret is Mr. SummerSlam. The 1990 match, the Hart Foundation versus Demolition, 2 out of 3 falls. Excellent match right there. And then 92, of course, Bret Hart versus the British Bulldog, one of the best SummerSlam matches in history. Even 93, Bret Hart versus Doink. That was not a good SummerSlam, but that match was the best one on the card in my opinion. 94, Bret Hart versus Owen Hart, steel cage match. And then 97, Bret Hart versus Undertaker with Shawn Michaels as the special guest referee. Bret had a lot of great SummerSlam moments. Highway to Hell 98, Triple H versus The Rock ladder match, Stone Cold versus The Undertaker. Those are some of the ones that stick out the most to me, my all-time favorite SummerSlam moments off the top of my head. This one comes from Slow Motion. Do you think WWE holds grudges against cities when fans do not react as wanted? Seattle, for example, hasn't had a pay-per-view in almost 9 years. I'm not sure if WWE holds a specific grudge, because if there's money to be made, WWE will do pay-per-views in any city, even if they hold some sort of personal grudge, which I don't see the need for a company to hold a grudge against a specific city. There's no real logical reason for that. I think that there might be a logical reason why WWE doesn't do more pay-per-views in Seattle and Portland. The Pacific Northwest, yes, there are some populated cities like Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, British Columbia, but beyond that, there's not a whole lot in the Pacific Northwest. It's pretty isolated when you take out the top 3 cities. And I think because of that, because there's such a distance between those 3 cities and much of the rest of North America, WWE doesn't run in the area all that much, and when they do, they just do Raw or SmackDown. They don't do pay-per-views. It's been a very long time since WWE has done a pay-per-view in Portland. I believe the last Portland pay-per-view was in 2008, No Mercy, and Seattle has not gone to pay-per-view in a very long time either. WrestleMania 19, arguably my all-time favorite WrestleMania, that was in Seattle, but I remember the buy rate was disappointing for that show. I was actually talking to Seahawk Brohawk, who's been a long-time viewer and fan of NoDQ.com. I met him a few weeks back, and we were talking about why WWE doesn't do bigger shows in the Pacific Northwest. with WrestleMania 19, because the buy rate was disappointing, maybe WWE just doesn't consider the Northwest to be a major market, and that's why they don't run the pay-per-views there. But holding a grudge, I don't see it for personal reasons, but for business reasons, maybe they just don't feel that it's a big enough market to justify doing big shows in the area. This one comes from Kyle Allen. Who would you like to see top CM Punk's 434 days as WWE Champion? Congrats on 1,000 videos. Thank you for that. Regarding CM Punk and if somebody should break his title reign, I say no. I say let Punk keep it. The thing about CM Punk's reign is it really worked out well because of the fact that Punk went from being a red-hot babyface to being a red-hot heel. Halfway through his title reign, he changed his character and went to being a heel. And I think that that helped keep his reign fresh. If CM Punk had remained a babyface the entire time, it would have been really stale. But the fact that he turned heel, it gave him some fresh opponents and it kept things interesting. But I also think that because of The Rock coming back, WWE was able to rely on The Rock and John Cena to get mainstream interest in the company, and CM Punk could just be doing the semi-main events as WWE Champion, and they had it like that for a while. Things just worked out with CM Punk's title reign. I think the stars would really need to align for somebody else to break that record, and I don't even think it needs to happen. WWE might purposely try to do it because of a personal grudge, but again, from a business perspective, what sense does it make to have a personal grudge and have somebody break the record just for the sake of breaking the record? To me, it doesn't make sense. And looking at it from a business perspective, right now, I don't see the guy that can really pull it off and be champion long term. You need somebody who can go back from being a face and a heel and can transition either way, and somebody who can have a good variety of opponents and keep things fresh. I mean, that's really what you need. And right now, I just don't think WWE has that person. They might never have that person for a long period of time. I just don't see the need to forcefully do it. If it happens organically, great. But right now, I don't think so. This one comes from B. Hill. First, I would like to say thank you and congrats. What are your top 5 favorite stories that you covered on NoDQ video? CM Punk, CM Punk, CM Punk, CM Punk, CM Punk. If I say CM Punk 5 times, will that bring him back to WWE? I think that the pipe bomb was a big story as far as getting NoDQ in a video off the ground in 2011, no doubt. That was a major factor in me starting to do videos. I think that CM Punk leaving was a huge story, and that definitely gave me a lot of content and time to discuss that. Daniel Bryan, his rise to the top, his career-ending injuries, that was definitely a big story to discuss. The breakup of the Shield was huge. Seth Rollins cashing in Money in the Bank at WrestleMania. The Undertaker losing to Roman Reigns at WrestleMania was a big story. Roman Reigns winning the Royal Rumble, how much controversy that generated. Those are some of the most interesting stories, I think, over the past several years, in my opinion. The stories that really got people worked up and got people talking. Those were definitely my favorite ones to cover on video for sure. And another one, I would say, the Attitude Era. Will the Attitude Era come back? Those questions. And that just led to the whole running gag where every time something even remotely violent or slightly offensive happens on WWE TV, people ask me, does that mean the Attitude Era is coming back? I mean, that was great stuff. This one comes from Chris Manders. Who would you rate as better between Shawn Michaels and Randy Savage? In my opinion, Randy Savage is underrated. Whew, that is a loaded question. That is a tough one to answer. There's several different ways you can look at it. There's several different categories. I would say strictly in the ring, you have to go with Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels, arguably the greatest in-ring performer in wrestling history when it comes right down to just performing in the ring and the athletic moves he pulled off, the psychology, everything Shawn did. He knew how to hit all the right notes. Shawn was one of those guys that just naturally knew what to do at all times. Just absolutely brilliant. Randy Savage, I would give him the edge as far as personality goes. Randy Savage is a character, one of the most interesting characters of all time. Promo-wise, I would also maybe give it to Randy Savage. Slightly, though. Shawn was a tremendous promo. He could cut some amazing promos. That one in Montreal when he was a heel, man, that was one of the best of all time. But Randy Savage, his promos were always top-notch. Even if he was saying things you had no idea what he was saying, they were still very entertaining. Randy Savage was always entertaining. Longevity, you have to give it to Shawn, because Shawn was able to have that great run in the 90s and then come back and have arguably even a better run. Unfortunately for Randy Savage, age took a toll on him, and he was a shell of his former self in the ring by the late 90s in WCW, and he was pretty broken down and could not do much, and he overstayed his welcome. Shawn got out at the right time. Shawn left when he was still arguably as good as he ever was. Shawn just knew the right time to step away. Randy Savage, unfortunately, stuck around longer than he should have. So, again, it's really close to say who's better. I think it just depends on your criteria. I think maybe overall, as a better performer, superstar, maybe Shawn, but I think in terms of drawing power, maybe Randy Savage. I think more casual fans would recognize Randy Savage over Shawn Michaels. That's just my gut feeling, at least. You know, Shawn was a big star in wrestling, but I think outside of wrestling, Randy Savage was a more recognizable character. This one comes from Boston Rules 15. Will a tag team match ever main event WrestleMania again? Maybe if Teddy Long's in charge, playa, but seriously, I think that you would need a major celebrity for that to even be a possibility. Tag team matches don't have nearly the amount of impact as a one-on-one match. Now, WrestleMania 1, you had Mr. T as the celebrity, but Mr. T cannot carry a match. That's why they had it as a tag match with Hogan there, Piper there. You know, Hogan and Piper was red hot feud, so it only made sense to do a tag team match. Having Hogan and Mr. T work together and use Mr. T's celebrity to generate more eyeballs watching Hogan and Piper go at it. That's what the tag match was all about. That's the purpose it served. I could only see WWE doing another tag team match if they get that major celebrity, but they don't have enough confidence in the celebrity being able to do a one-on-one match on a major show, and WWE would feel better by having the celebrity tag with somebody, and that way the superstar can get a rub off of that celebrity. Maybe one day, but I think it's unlikely at this point we will see a tag match actually be the main event of WrestleMania. But with the big enough star, never say never. This one comes from Alec. What feuds have been the best examples of long-term storytelling? What can WWE do to write more compelling feuds? Looking back, the Mega Powers storyline with Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage is one of the best examples of a long-term storyline. They planned that thing out about a year and a half in advance. When Hogan first came out to help Randy Savage on Saturday night's main event, Savage was being attacked by the Honky Tonk Man and the Hart Foundation. WWE had already decided that eventually Hogan and Savage were going to go one-on-one for the title at WrestleMania. WrestleMania 4, they shot the angle where Savage won the title with Hogan's help, and then slowly over the next year they built up to that big moment where the Mega Powers exploded. You had little teases here and there. SummerSlam, there was a little tease. Survivor Series, there was a little bit more of a tease. Royal Rumble, things got more intense between the two of them. And then finally, on the main event, they shot the big angle with Hogan, Savage, and Elizabeth. Unfortunately, times have changed, and because you have weekly television, it's a different beast now, and you have guys get hurt a lot more often, and that can also throw a monkey wrench in plans. It's just a different era now, and it is more difficult to do a long-term storyline. So I do give the writers a little bit of leeway because of that. The fact that they have to come up with so much television every week, and guys can get hurt, and that can throw things off. But still, we do not see much in the way of long-term planning, and it would be nice if we saw a storyline really play out over 6 months with a solid beginning, middle, and end, and we don't see that enough. Sometimes we see great starts. WWE is known for that. They start off a storyline red hot, but they have no idea how to finish it, and it just fizzles out. That's part of the problem when you do not have a very good writing team. They're only thinking short term instead of thinking, okay, what is going to be the end result of this? You know, sometimes it's good when you book backwards, and WWE does do that. Rock and Cena for that once-in-a-lifetime match. They did book that backwards, even though it was predictable, the second match. At least it made sense, and it was something that played out over several months. And that's what happens when you book backwards. Sometimes that's a good way to do things, to have your plan for WrestleMania and then figure out everything that's going to happen leading up to WrestleMania. That seems to be when the storytelling is the most effective. Sometimes it's a bit predictable, but with good writing, you can come up with some interesting twists and turns to throw people off. This one comes from Mr. Taxi. Of the superstars that have debuted within the past 5 years, who do you see going into the Hall of Fame? And this is a first-time asker, Mr. Taxi. Of the most recent batch of superstars, Roman Reigns is the obvious one. I definitely see him going into the Hall of Fame. Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, I think all three members of the Shield will be in the WWE Hall of Fame. I think pretty much anybody who's a semi-big name right now, who just debuted fairly recently, will go into the Hall of Fame one day unless they end up on bad terms with the company. Because at the end of the day, it's not so much what you've accomplished, but it's more about how good of terms you're on with the people in charge. Unfortunately, politics do play a role when it comes to who goes into the Hall of Fame and who doesn't. Beyond the Shield members, I could see Samoa Joe going in someday. I could see Braun Strowman going in someday. I mean, just pretty much anybody who's somewhat of a main eventer right now, I think has a good shot of going into the Hall of Fame. AJ Styles is another one. There's plenty of guys that I could see going into the Hall of Fame one day. 15, 20, 25 years from now, I think a good amount of them will end up in the Hall of Fame. Got this one here from Steve Appleby. Did GFW miss an opportunity with a successful invasion storyline when taking over TNA? Could have made the announcement after the story. Yes, I agree with that 100%. I definitely feel TNA/GFW missed out on a big opportunity. I talked about this months ago, maybe even a year or two ago. I had this idea that if TNA was going to rebrand and change their name, they should have done an NWO-like invasion storyline, but the differences between TNA and the WCW invasion is that in the TNA invasion, the invaders would have won. You would have had this new group of outlaws, guys that have credibility that the fans like, that were portrayed as badasses and cool, come in and just wipe TNA out, take over completely, rebrand the company, and have a fresh start that way. I think that part of the problem with TNA as a brand is it lost all semblance of being something cool to like. And I think if you had done an invasion angle properly, where you brought out these guys that come out in limos, they have the women, you make them as cool as possible, and they eventually take over, then it can help the overall image and make the brand stronger. I just think it would have been a really good idea to do something like that rather than just say, oh, hey, we're GFW now. I think it does nothing for the company now that they're GFW, because GFW really has no history, anything positive, anything cool about it. And I think if you had actually done an invasion storyline, you could have established GFW as something really cool by having them do all the stuff that worked with the NWO, only this time the invasion is ended when the invaders win. This one comes from @KingHarry1998. Hey Aaron, congrats on 1,000. Seems like WWE isn't interested in taking risks and chances like they used to. Your thoughts? That is absolutely the case, and I think it gets worse as time progresses. The biggest reason is that WWE doesn't have to take chances. When WCW went out of business, WWE all of a sudden had normal competition. ECW was gone, WCW was gone, WWE was more or less a monopoly. They tried to artificially create their own competition with Raw and SmackDown, but the fact is WWE did not have to really be at the top of their game, so to speak, when it came to producing the most compelling shows possible. The writers could take it easy. Everyone could take it easy and not put in 100% effort into the shows. And now it's even more the case because of the WWE Network. I mean, prior to the network launching, WWE still had to sell people on pay-per-views. Fans were paying $50 a month for a pay-per-view. WWE had to produce at least somewhat compelling television to convince people to put down $50 on a pay-per-view. Now it doesn't matter. Why does WWE need to try? They got their loyal fan base, they have their subscribers, and WWE's goal right now is just to gain new subscribers and keep their television deal. As long as WWE has their TV deal, they will be fine. And every now and then they'll do something to boost the ratings if they need to. They'll throw out a big match like John Cena versus Nakamura to boost up the ratings. But beyond that, WWE really doesn't need to do anything. There's no sense of urgency to think outside the box and try new things. So unfortunately, the product has been stale for several years because of that, because WWE doesn't need to take any chances creatively, and they're just running as a business, you know. I would like it as a fan if WWE was doing things more like an art form, where they were trying to take chances, experiment, do new things, but they're running strictly as a business right now, and being creative and artistic, that is very much secondary. Got this one here from DJ Whitey. Ayo Aaron, would you work for WWE/GFW if they called you today and told you to give up NoDQ.com? No, I would not. I've gotten this question over the years. If I had a chance to work for one of those companies, would I? The answer is no. I do not like to be stressed out. I like my life being calm and peaceful. Working for WWE or GFW could be very stressful, especially if you're a person that does not like stress. I enjoy what I do. It is very low stress, not much to worry about. I can do things at my own pace for the most part, and that's how I like it. I would not want to deal with the drama of working for WWE or GFW. I have no interest. I think that I would go there, and within a couple of weeks, I would want to quit. I would lose my hair, what's left of it. I would just lose my mind working for one of those companies. And I've heard a lot of stories from people where they wanted to work for WWE, and then when they got there, they found out it wasn't so great. The grass wasn't really greener on the other side. It's not all it's cracked up to be. That's what I've heard from a lot of people. So I'm perfectly happy doing what I'm doing. I'd rather just sit behind the computer or sit in front of a camera and talk trash and tell people how to do their jobs when I've never set foot in a ring, yada, yada, yada. whatever. I have fun doing this, and I think I do a good job at it. I think I know what I'm talking about, and that's not me being cocky or anything. I just think that as somebody who's been watching wrestling for pretty much my entire life, 33, 34 years, I think I know a thing or two about wrestling. And I think that this is something that I will keep doing, covering wrestling on NoDQ.com, doing videos. It's just something I enjoy doing. And if you can find something that you're passionate about and you can make a living out of, why not? This one comes from JC Combat 007. WWE from 1992 to 1996 was a terrible era for many reasons. Was there a time when you almost stopped being a fan during that era? I had briefly stopped watching WWF back in late 92, shortly after SummerSlam 92. I stopped watching it for a couple months, but then I got back into it. And there really hasn't been a period where I stopped watching from any era. But it was challenging. It was definitely challenging in that 93 through 95 period. Once WCW started to build up some momentum, when Hogan came in, I started gaining more interest in wrestling. And by the time Nitro started, wrestling became really fun to watch again. I would say from 95 on, wrestling was something that was very exciting throughout the entire Monday Night War period. But yeah, late 92, it was a pretty dismal time to be a wrestling fan. WWF had pretty much sunk in popularity coming off of the steroid scandal and the other scandals. And then WCW was doing very poorly business-wise. Neither company was doing well. It wasn't until Hogan went to WCW started to do better, and then WWE had to start changing. With ECW doing all these innovative things and WCW catching up to WWE in popularity, WWE had to push the envelope, going back to that previous question. WWE had to experiment and take chances in order to compete and ultimately survive. This one comes from Tyler Joseph Smith. What are your thoughts on Joey Ryan using his penis in matches? I think he's ruining wrestling and making us fans look bad. It's the independent scene, so I really don't think it's that big of a deal. If it was mainstream wrestling and it was causing casual fans to lose interest in a show, then I would say that's a very bad thing. But if anything, it might get new people watching wrestling. I'm not sure what person in their right mind would want to become a fan because they saw a guy get flipped over by somebody's penis. But some people like weird stuff. People like the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So, hats off to Joey Ryan. He figured out a way to get his name out there and make a name for himself and make money and do something different. Good for him. That's all I really have to say about it. Joey Ryan is just doing what he needs to do to make a living and be successful at what he does. He's trying to think outside the box. So yeah, he's gonna do this gimmick where he uses his penis powers to win matches. Whatever. It's something different at least. So I give him credit for the creativity. And at the end of the day, I like when people are creative and they try to do different things. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. Some people might like it, some people might hate it. But you have to try new things, It'll get boring if you just do the same thing over and over again. You need to freshen things up and think outside the box and do different things. This one comes from Joseph Allen. What are the most important things needed to create a compelling feud? Promo, storyline, match quality? Which feud had it all? You really need everything. You need a good mix. You need a compelling storyline. You need characters that are interesting. You need a conflict. You need a reason to care. And when it's all said and done, they need to be able to deliver in the ring. You can have all the hype in the world, but then if you have a disappointing match, then what was the point? I look at Steve Austin and Bret Hart as one of the all-time greatest programs because the promos were amazing. We saw the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin. We saw that character develop. We saw the heel turn of Bret Hart, and Bret Hart arguably reach his peak in the WWE as a character and a promo. And then when it came time to getting in the ring, those guys tore it up and had, in my opinion, the best WrestleMania match of all time, that submission match at WrestleMania 13. That was, in my opinion, the best storyline / feud in the history of WWE between Bret Hart and Steve Austin. It felt real. I felt personally like those guys really hated each other in real life and wanted to destroy each other. So my perfect example would be Austin and Bret Hart when you look at great storylines and great storytelling. This one comes from Andy. What are your top 5 go-home shows in WWE history? Great question there. I do not think I've gotten that one ever in 1,000 episodes, and I appreciate the 1 million hashtag, but that's going to be tough to pull off. I might need to live to 1,000 years old to reach that many episodes, maybe even more than that. My top favorite go-home Raws. I would have to say the go-home Raw for WrestleMania 13 with Bret Hart. You know, I mentioned in that previous question, Bret Hart and Stone Cold, that feud, the steel cage match, and afterwards Bret Hart got screwed and shoved down Vince McMahon, started using profanity. One of my all-time favorite Raw moments, and one of those segments where I was watching that and my jaw was dropping. Bret Hart using profanity, that was just extremely out of nowhere. And then you had Steve Austin and Bret Hart having their big confrontation. That was just an amazing setup for WrestleMania 13. Highway to Hell, 98, the go-home show for SummerSlam. I just thought that was a great Raw. You had the Hell in a Cell match with Mankind and Kane, I believe. And then at the end of Raw, you had this stare down between Austin and Undertaker. And I believe the ramp caught on fire. It was the symbolic Highway to Hell. They had an awesome video package with Austin and Undertaker using the song by AC/DC. That was one of my favorite go-home shows. And then the angle they did with The Rock in China was really good. Shawn Michaels coming to the aid at the end. I love that segment. Thinking about some other ones. Invasion, 2001, the go-home show. The big tease with the old Stone Cold come back. And then the end, you had the big in-ring brawl between Team WWF and Team WCW/ECW. Austin's music hits, Austin comes out, and then he just stuns all the WCW, ECW guys. The crowd is going absolutely insane. I hate what they did at Invasion with Austin turning back heel, but the setup for that pay-per-view, that final segment, I mean, that was just money in the bank. And I believe that Invasion pay-per-view set the record for the biggest pay-per-view buy rate of any non-Big Four WWE pay-per-view event. And then the SmackDown before Survivor Series 2001. Most notably, Paul Heyman doing the promo on Vince, the worked shoot promo, just ripping into Vince for stealing his ideas. I love that promo, one of my all-time favorites. And I'm not sure if it was that SmackDown or the Raw before, but one of those shows, the end of the show, you had everybody coming out, this big brawl, everybody exchanging finishers, and the crowd was just going absolutely nuts for everything. I think Austin was the last guy standing, but everyone took turns hitting each other with finishers. It was just an epic end to the show to set up Survivor Series. I think I named 4. I'm trying to think of more. You know what? Shawn Michaels, right before SummerSlam 2005 in Montreal, cutting that promo on Hulk Hogan and then bringing up Bret Hart, Bret Hart's music hitting, people thinking that Bret Hart was going to show up, but Shawn was just trolling everybody. I love that. That heel Shawn was just on fire. And that made me really invested in SummerSlam that year for sure. This one comes from Bloog. If you had to book a Survivor Series match with Attitude Era versus today, who would you pick for each team and why? I would have to go with the obvious. I would have to go with the big stars versus the big stars. If I had to pick the old school guys, I would have Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Ultimate Warrior. You know what? I'd put Shawn Michaels on the old school team and Bret Hart. I'd have those 5. And then for the 5 Attitude Era guys, I would have Stone Cold, The Rock, Triple H, Mankind, and Kane. Or Undertaker. I'd put Undertaker in there. That would be my 5-on-5 match. The Ultimate Golden Era versus Attitude Era match. Maybe even do a triple threat. 5-on-5-on-5 and include the current guys. If I was going to have a current team for Survivor Series, I would have John Cena, Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, and AJ Styles. Those would be my 5 for the current era. Alright, this next one comes from Tommy McCardle, aka Wade, the former voice of NoDQ CAW, for those of you that remember NoDQ CAW. Do you ever see a superstar getting as over as Sting did without talking for over a year? If so, who could pull it off? That is a great question. I do not know if we will ever see a guy like that in WWE. Vince McMahon is all about having his wrestlers be sports entertainers, and this means they not only wrestle, but they cut great promos and they do TV appearances, they're in movies, they do all sorts of different media appearances. I find it hard to believe WWE would ever have a character that never speaks. I think there are a few guys that could pull it off. I think Shinsuke Nakamura could pull it off. I think that Braun Strowman could pull it off. There's a few other guys, but I do think that a few guys could succeed without talking, but most of them need to be able to show some personality. Very rarely do you have a character that is such an enigma that he can get away with never talking. WCW was able to pull it off with Sting and Goldberg for a while. He had that streak going. He beat Hogan in the Georgia Dome without saying anything prior to that. I think maybe his first couple of matches he would say a couple of words into the camera, but he never actually had an official interview until after he had already beaten Hogan in the Georgia Dome. So it is possible. WCW did it, and WCW is a company that went out of business. Maybe it was accidental. Maybe they never intended for these guys to go that long without talking. It would be interesting if WWE could pull it off, but knowing Vince McMahon's mindset, I don't think we'll ever see it, honestly. This one comes from Michael. Best match of each pay-per-view in WWE history. I'm not going to go over every single pay-per-view, but I will cover the big 4. WrestleMania, Steve Austin versus Bret Hart. WrestleMania 13, as I mentioned earlier, my all-time favorite WrestleMania match. And Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker would be right up there as well from WrestleMania 25. SummerSlam, Shawn Michaels versus Triple H. SummerSlam 2002, as I mentioned earlier as well. I also forgot to mention earlier CM Punk versus Brock Lesnar from SummerSlam 2013. That is another one of my favorite SummerSlam matches. Survivor Series, I might say the Invasion match, the 5-on-5. Survivor Series match, WWE versus the Alliance, or the very first Elimination Chamber match stands out to me. Royal Rumble, 1992 Royal Rumble. Ric Flair winning the Rumble, my all-time favorite Rumble match. If I had to go with a singles match at the Royal Rumble, Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit, 2003. It's a match that unfortunately, because of the circumstances with Chris Benoit, it's a match that is going to be forgotten about in history, but that match was just brilliant. Excellent, excellent match. The crowd gave Benoit a standing ovation afterwards. One of the best matches in WWE history. More recently, that triple threat with John Cena, Brock Lesnar, and Seth Rollins was a great non-Rumble match match at the Royal Rumble. Alright, it's time for my top 10 WWE biggest hits. These are my own personal favorite moments in WWE history. Number 10 is the debut of Chris Jericho on Monday Night Raw. One of the times I remember marking out the most was when Chris Jericho showed up after that countdown had ended. The music hit, the lights came on, Jericho flashed on the screen. That moment when the word Jericho showed up on that screen, I pretty much just jumped out of my seat. It was an amazing moment. Chris Jericho had finally arrived in WWE, and for fans that were frustrated for many years about Jericho not getting his break in WCW, to see him come out there and finally, in one instant, be a major superstar. Jericho was made in one night. Just showing up there and cutting that promo. In one night, Chris Jericho accomplished more than he had accomplished in his entire WCW career. In one night, he was a bigger star than he had ever been before. It was, in my opinion, the greatest debut in wrestling history. Number 9, Mick Foley winning his first world title on Raw. This was January 4th, 1999, although the episode of Raw was taped almost a week earlier. It was one of those rare occurrences where WWE actually spoiled the show on their very own website. You know, people have accused me over the years of ruining wrestling for giving out spoilers. WWE spoiled the title change on WWE.com several days before the event. Mick Foley winning the title was an epic moment. One of the biggest crowd pops in history. Definitely the right move by WWE to give Mick Foley this win. It felt so right to see Foley with that WWE title after all the punishment he put himself through. After that Hell in a Cell match where he was thrown off by The Undertaker. To see Foley finally get the WWE title, it was one of the best moves WWE ever made, and a real turning point in the Monday Night War where fans were finally getting sick of WCW. You had the finger poke of doom, which was symbolically the downfall of WCW, or the beginning of the downfall. And Mick Foley winning just symbolized everything that was right about WWE, where they were pushing the newer stars and the new generation was finally being able to shine in mainstream wrestling. Number 8, Ric Flair winning the 1992 Royal Rumble. My all-time favorite Royal Rumble match. In my opinion, one of the best WWE matches in history, period, from any era. Ric Flair having the performance of a lifetime, going out there, entering at number 3, lasting the whole thing, winning one of the most star-studded Royal Rumbles in WWE history. You had Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Sid Vicious, Undertaker, Roddy Piper, British Bulldog, Shawn Michaels. The list goes on. That Rumble had so many talented guys. Jake the Snake Roberts, Big Boss Man. So many of the biggest stars in one ring, in one match. And Ric Flair was the last man standing. And of course, the legendary commentary by Bobby Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon. The back and forth between those two. It was just a brilliant match and a brilliant show. Number 7, the Mega Powers exploding. One of my all-time favorite storylines, a storyline that WWE actually planned out a year and a half in advance, and that was just something that had not been seen before, where they had this storyline figured out and they slowly built up to it. You had Hulk Hogan helping Randy Savage win at WrestleMania 4, and then their partnership reached its peak at SummerSlam, but started to show signs of dysfunction. And the teases continued. Survivor Series, there was a little bit of friction. Royal Rumble, there was more. And then finally, at the main event pay-per-view, or should I say the main event special, you had Randy Savage finally snap and turn on Hulk Hogan. Great angle to set up WrestleMania. The whole thing was awesome. Number 6, Shawn Michaels turning on Marty Jannetty. The barbershop segment, January 1992. In my opinion, one of the greatest heel turns in wrestling history. Arguably the best heel turn in WWE history. When you had Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty finally split the end of the rockers. You had Shawn Michaels throwing Marty Jannetty through the barbershop window. Or should I say, Marty Jannetty jumping through the barbershop window, as Bobby Heenan would say, to try and escape from Shawn Michaels. Great commentary by Heenan. I love Heenan's commentary during this entire segment. Shawn Michaels was great, and this was the beginning of one of the greatest careers in wrestling history. Number 5, Roddy Piper smashing the gold record over the head of Captain Lou Albano. The end of 1984, heading into 1985, you had this segment with Cyndi Lauper and Lou Albano. This was Lou Albano's babyface turn. He had been a hated heel manager for many years, but he had worked with Cyndi Lauper, and this was the big angle to set up WrestleMania. Roddy Piper smashing the gold record over Lou Albano's head. Hulk Hogan coming to the rescue. This set up the war to settle the score, and then that would set up the very first WrestleMania. So this angle was really crucial in building up interest in the very first WrestleMania. Number 4, the first Hell in a Cell match from 1997. One of my all-time favorite matches, the first Hell in a Cell match. Shawn Michaels put on one of the best performances of all time, bumping like crazy for The Undertaker, bleeding all over the place. This is what you expect out of a cage match, where it's just pure carnage. Shawn, of course, taking the big bump through the table on the outside, and then the big moment to end the match where you have Kane, after all these months of teases and anticipation, you finally have Kane arrive. You have Vince on commentary. It's gotta be Kane, which is classic. You have Kane opening up the cell door with his bare hands, getting in the ring, tombstoning The Undertaker. And then you have Shawn Michaels, who's in a pool of blood with one hand, is able to cover The Undertaker and win the match. I mean, I just love everything about this all-time classic WWE match and moment with Kane's debut. Number 3, The Rock becoming the corporate champion. The Rock had teased going babyface in the fall of 1998, and then you had the Survivor Series 98 Deadly Games tournament to determine a new WWE champion. At the time, watching it, us as viewers, we thought, okay, The Rock is going to win as a babyface and be the new good guy champion. But no, we got not one but 2 swerves. First, we had Shane McMahon, who was a babyface going into this event, swerve and double-cross Steve Austin, giving Steve Austin the middle finger and escaping the arena with Vince McMahon. That was swerve number 1. And then swerve number 2 was when you had Vince and Shane come out during the Rock versus Mankind main event, and you had a recreation of the Montreal Screwjob. So basically, you had Vince taking that real-life Screwjob and using it to advance his own storyline. Pure brilliance by everyone involved, and this includes Vince Russo too, who was involved in the scripting of this. This was one of those times where the swerves really worked, because the swerves had not been done to death. It was fresh at the time. You had The Rock turning on Mankind, Vince turning on Mankind. You felt really bad for Mankind. Steve Austin got screwed. He came out at the end, but The Rock had already won the title. And this set up WrestleMania 15, and WWE business was just on fire at this time. Excellent angle, very memorable. Rock as the corporate champion was exceptional. Number 2, the CM Punk pipe bomb. CM Punk coming out on Raw. He was scheduled to face John Cena in Chicago for the WWE title, but then Punk got on the mic and cut this promo nobody was expecting. Punk just basically broke the fourth wall. He waved to the camera and said, "Hi, Colt Cabana." He trashed WWE management. He said maybe WWE would be better off when Vince McMahon was dead, but not really, because the doofus son-in-law and the idiotic daughter, Stephanie, would be running the company, and things would not be any better. And Punk said maybe he would take the WWE title and go to Ring of Honor with it. This promo, I cannot stress how much interest it attracted from fans on NoDQ.com. It crashed NoDQ. Not just for the pipe bomb, but also at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. This promo got fans invested in WWE again. When a lot of fans had written off WWE and had lost interest, it was Punk's promo that brought them back and got people excited about WWE again, and made that Money in the Bank pay-per-view one of the best in WWE history. And finally, number one for the biggest WWE hits in history, the Steve Austin Bret Hart double turn at WrestleMania 13. One of my favorite matches of all time, and in my opinion, the best double turn of all time. You took Steve Austin, who was the ultimate heel, and you made him a sympathetic babyface by the time this match was over. You had Bret Hart, who had gone from being a beloved babyface to the most hated man in America. You had Bret Hart put the sharpshooter on Steve Austin in a submission match, and the fans thought that Steve Austin would tap out because so many people had tapped out to the sharpshooter. However, Steve Austin was the one guy who refused to quit, and this was simultaneously as Steve Austin was bleeding like a madman, blood pouring down his face. He was in the sharpshooter and refusing to give up. He would rather pass out than give up to Bret Hart, and that sealed Austin's fate as the top guy in the company. That gave him so much sympathy and got the fans behind him. And then after the match, Bret Hart, as he said himself, did what any great villain would do. He kicked the guy when he was down. And that, in one instant, made Bret Hart a hated villain. Just a perfectly executed double turn. And that's the match, in my opinion, that really put Steve Austin's career on the map and ultimately caused WWE to have a total resurgence in popularity. This match, I would say, was the biggest factor in making Stone Cold Steve Austin the man in wrestling. Alright, so if I'm doing WWE's top hits, I also have to do WWE's top misses. Here we go with my top 10 biggest WWE misses in my opinion. Number 10, Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar from WrestleMania 20. Arguably the match that had the most hype in WWE history that failed to deliver. Both guys were leaving the company, and because of that, neither guy really put in the effort into their match. Now, with that being said, I also feel like the fans were never going to give these guys a chance. From the moment these two guys went out there, the fans knew both of them were leaving, and because of that, they did not give either guy a chance. They cared more about Steve Austin than the other two participants. Goldberg and Lesnar figured, screw it, the fans do not care, so why should we? And they just went out there and had a very forgettable match, yet the fan reactions made the match memorable for all the wrong reasons. Number 9, Hornswoggle, revealed as Vince McMahon's son. Now, the original storyline was Vince McMahon getting blown up in a limousine, but of course the Chris Benoit situation happened and WWE had to change plans. So in the storyline, it was revealed that Vince faked his death, and then it was revealed that he had an illegitimate son. This had potential. It was initially believed that Mr. Kennedy was going to be Vince's son, which would have been an interesting storyline. But then Kennedy got himself suspended and WWE had to come up with something else. Now, instead of coming up with another wrestler that could have potentially been a main eventer, WWE decided to turn the whole thing into a joke and make Hornswoggle Vince's son. This was a really weak storyline payoff. Fans were unhappy. I was unhappy. I was hoping for something more. They just turned the whole thing into one big joke. Number 8, King Mabel. Mabel winning the 1995 King of the Ring. What was WWE thinking with this one? Men on a Mission, they were alright as a mid-card tag team, but Mabel winning King of the Ring, that was a very questionable decision when you had Shawn Michaels in that tournament and you had several other guys that would have been better choices for King of the Ring. This also led to one of the worst WWE title matches in history. King Mabel versus Diesel for the title at SummerSlam 95. Arguably the worst SummerSlam of all time, with that main event just being the icing on the cake. If you want to call it cake. We could all call it something else that begins with the letter S, but it is what it is. Number 7, Undertaker versus Undertaker. There was so much hype about this, so much intrigue. You had this idea that there were not one but two Undertakers. You had Ted DiBiase's Undertaker. We all thought maybe Undertaker had sold out to Ted DiBiase, but then you had Paul Bearer saying that the real Undertaker was coming back. The Undertaker had not been seen since the 1994 Royal Rumble. It was really interesting what was going to happen with these two Undertakers going at it. Well, basically what happened was you had the man who would later be known as Chains in WWE, wear these boots where he appeared to be taller than he actually was. He had lifts in his boots up against Mark Calloway, the original Undertaker. And the match was complete garbage. Once the bell rang, the crowd did not care about this at all. They proceeded to have a very weak match with no crowd heat whatsoever, and the whole thing just fell completely flat. The entrance of the real Undertaker was spectacular, but once the bell rang, it was just awful. One of the worst WWE pay-per-view main events of all time. Number 6, the relaunch of ECW. WWE hit gold when they produced not one but two one-night stand pay-per-views. Maybe the first mistake was having a second one-night stand, because then that just defeats the purpose of having one-night stand. But anyways, WWE had two very strong ECW reunion pay-per-views in 2005 and 2006 respectively. In 2006, WWE decided to bring back ECW as the third brand in addition to Raw and SmackDown. The problem with this was that ECW was a product of the 1990s. It was a renegade underground promotion that was doing innovative things. In 2006, ECW was a nostalgia act. That's what it was. And when WWE tried to bring back ECW, it just did not work. You had a watered down version of what ECW originally was, and it's really difficult to have an underground promotion on a mainstream television show. It just did not work. And the whole thing pretty much fell apart by December when WWE produced the infamous December to Dismember pay-per-view, which is generally considered to be one of the worst WWE produced pay-per-views of all time. Number 5, Brock Lesnar ending The Undertaker's streak. Yes, it was one of the most shocking moments in WWE history, but it was shocking because nobody thought it would happen. Nobody thought Brock Lesnar would beat The Undertaker. And the match itself was very forgettable. It was not a good match. The crowd heat was virtually non-existent for the match because nobody thought Lesnar would win. Lesnar was not booked strong enough to be a credible challenger for The Undertaker. And that just goes to show how WWE, in a way, dropped the ball with Brock Lesnar. If they had built up Lesnar properly, the fans would have seen Lesnar as a legitimate threat to The Undertaker. But in this match, fans did not buy into Lesnar as a credible challenger. So when Lesnar actually did win, the crowd was in complete shock. Now, you would think that WWE would have taken advantage of this and used Lesnar to build up the next star, but that really did not happen. Lesnar continued to be a part-timer, and because of this, the momentum from beating The Undertaker fell flat, and nobody really gained the rub from beating Lesnar, beating the guy that ended The Undertaker's streak. WWE could have done it at WrestleMania 31, but Roman Reigns was getting booed out of buildings so much that WWE got cold feet on having Reigns beat Lesnar at WrestleMania 31. And after that, you had Undertaker fight Lesnar again and beat Lesnar, getting his win back. The whole thing pretty much seemed like it was a bad idea to have Undertaker lose, especially when Undertaker kept wrestling after WrestleMania 30. In hindsight, I think it was the wrong call for Undertaker's streak to end at WrestleMania 30. Number 4, Roman Reigns winning the 2015 Royal Rumble. Fans were not ready for Reigns to win the Rumble, and the problem WWE made for themselves was having Daniel Bryan come back right around this time and vow to win the Rumble and get his title back that he had lost because of injury. Fans were emotionally invested in Daniel Bryan. That's the story they wanted for WrestleMania. They wanted the comeback story of Daniel Bryan winning the WWE title at WrestleMania 31. Now, I understand WWE's perspective. They're trying to build up Roman Reigns as the new guy, and Bryan got injured, and there was the fear that he would get injured again, which in fact did happen. So WWE was right in that sense, but they made the mistake of bringing back Bryan right before the Royal Rumble. They shouldn't have done that. If the plan was for Roman Reigns to win, Bryan should have come back after the Rumble, because once Bryan was announced for the Rumble, that's what fans wanted. And then at the Rumble, the moment Bryan was eliminated, the crowd just completely turned on the match because they knew exactly where it was going at that point. They knew Reigns was going to win the Rumble, and they just completely booed Reigns out of the building. WWE sensed this, and they brought out The Rock at the end of the show to endorse Roman Reigns, and even that did not work. You had The Rock raising Roman Reigns' hand, and that classic moment where The Rock just has this look on his face like, I'd rather be anywhere else on the planet but right here, right now. That really told 1,000 words. A picture tells 1,000 words. The Rock's reaction when he's holding up Roman Reigns' hand, that is certainly worth 1,000 words. Number 3, Katie Vick. What else can be said about this that isn't already been said? Katie Vick, one of the worst angles WWE ever did, actually going as far as to have necrophilia on a WWE television show. And I do not get offended by WWE storylines. There's pretty much nothing that they can do to offend me, but this was just beyond stupid. Why do a segment like this that will just turn off people? Nobody is going to find necrophilia to be entertaining. And this got some of the most negative responses to any Raw in history. People were seriously offended by this and were threatening to give up on WWE because of this segment. And traditionally, it is not a good idea to do something like this on WWE programming, something that will alienate viewers. Looking back, I think it was one of the most controversial things that WWE ever put on a television show. And I think nobody found it funny. I think Vince McMahon was literally the only person in the world that found this to be entertaining. I guess that says a lot about Vince. Number 2, Steve Austin's heel turn at WrestleMania 17. Some of you might be surprised that this is not number 1, but I think I have a better one for number 1. Maybe you guys can guess what that is. I was never a fan of this, and I love WrestleMania 17. That's what makes it so frustrating, because I think WrestleMania 17 is one of the greatest WWE pay-per-views of all time. But when they turned Austin heel, it just felt so disappointing. Steve Austin was so beloved by the fans. He came back from this long injury that put him out for almost a year. The fans had so much invested in Steve Austin. For him to align himself with Vince, nobody wanted to see that. Nobody wanted to see Austin become a coward. That was not his character. As Jim Ross said, it was like John Wayne running away from a fight. It just felt so wrong, and business took a hit after that. People started tuning out. Attendance went down. Ratings went down. People started losing interest in WWE when Steve Austin turned heel. Austin even said it himself that it was a mistake, and if he had had the chance to do it over, he would have called an audible and stunned Vince in the ring right there to end WrestleMania. And turning Austin heel in Texas, what were they thinking? Definitely one of the biggest misfires WWE ever made. And finally, the number one biggest miss in WWE history, in my opinion, that is the invasion angle. Yes, there were a few highlights, like the ECW alliance being formed, and then Steve Austin coming out and stunning everybody prior to invasion. But overall, such a disappointment. There was so much potential with this. WWE could have had WWE versus ECW versus WCW for years. This could have played out for years. You should have had the brand split with WWE as one show and WCW as the other show. Vince owned WCW. It was his. Yet he decided to bury WCW. He decided for his own ego that WCW guys could not go over the WWE guys, even though Vince owned everything. He owned WCW, but he would not allow WCW guys to go over. You had DDP getting buried. You had Booker T getting buried. All the WCW guys looked inferior. Maybe it was because of that one bad crowd in Tacoma, Washington, where they booed everything related to WCW out of the building. They booed Booker T and Buff Bagwell out of the building. Vince got cold feet and decided not to go through with WCW as a full-fledged brand. And in my opinion, there was a ton of money that was burned, left on the table. They could have made so much money. They could have done a big WrestleMania with WWE versus WCW matches. They could have done yearly invasion pay-per-views. This could have gone on for years with a true brand extension, WWE versus WCW, and they blew the whole damn thing in 6 months. By Survivor Series, it was all over, and WCW was buried once and for all. Just such a disappointment as a fan. They could have done so much more with it, and it was the worst booked invasion of all time. You know, the NWO was great, but WCW was just never taken seriously in the booking. They were all portrayed as a bunch of second-rate wrestlers, and that's how the fans reacted, and it fizzled out in 6 months. Just, it's so frustrating. They could have done so much more with that, and they chose not to. Alright guys, it's now time for my WrestleMania 34 proposed card. Here is a list of matches that I've put together for WrestleMania 34. I tried to come up with the most interesting card possible, utilizing the WWE talent roster to the best of my abilities. So here we go. This is my card, a full card. I'm guessing this show would be around 5 hours. My hope is that WWE would not have WrestleMania 34 go beyond 5 hours. I think 5 is even too long, but I tried to get as many people as possible on the card in a way that makes sense. So let's go ahead and break down the matches. The main event will actually be a double main event. For the Universal title, the Vince McMahon match. The match that will make Vince happy, that will appeal to the casual fans. That match is John Cena versus Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship. This is a dream match, and the way I see it, this would be the match where John Cena passes the torch. This would be like Hogan versus The Rock, or John Cena versus The Rock. This would be one of those dream matches, but this time it's John Cena who is passing the torch to the next generation. Cena would put over Reigns here. This might be the one match where John Cena is overwhelmingly the babyface, but for me, I'm fine with this, because the other match that would be the main event would be for the WWE Championship, and this would be for Triple H. This would be Triple H's baby. This would be the match for the internet fans. This would be AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura for the WWE Championship. What I would do is have either AJ or Nakamura win the Royal Rumble and then go on to face the other one for the title at WrestleMania. Let these guys go out there. Do not have them hold back. Let them have the best match possible. Let them try to go out there and have the greatest match in WrestleMania history. Reigns and Cena is more about the personalities. Reigns and Cena can go out there and just the characters clashing, that will generate the heat. AJ Styles and Nakamura, let them wrestle. Let them do all sorts of crazy things and just tear the house down. Those would be my two main event matches. Next up, I would have a rematch from Great Balls of Fire. Brock Lesnar versus Samoa Joe. This would be Brock Lesnar's final WWE match. And prior to this, I would have Paul Heyman turn on Brock Lesnar and join up with Samoa Joe. The Paul Heyman character is a slime ball. And when he sees his cash cow, Brock Lesnar, getting a little too old, and if Heyman feels that Lesnar is just starting to lose it, then that's when Heyman stabs his guy in the back and jumps to what he feels is the next big thing, and that would be Samoa Joe. And I would have Joe win. I would put over Joe and make him the new beast. Lesnar would pass the torch to Samoa Joe, and Joe would get his win back from Great Balls of Fire. Next up would be the Battle of the New Day members. I would break up the New Day and do a triple threat match. I like having a variety at WrestleMania. Have your strong one-on-one matches, but also have a strong triple threat match for the show. And this would be it. You would have Big E versus Kofi Kingston versus Xavier Woods. The New Day has been a major act in WWE for several years, and this would be when the New Day would finally explode and have their big match, the three members against each other. And I would have Big E win. I think Big E would be the guy to elevate and potentially build up as a next future superstar in WWE. Moving on to the United States Championship. Again, I would have variety on this show. This match would be a fatal four-way match. You would have Kevin Owens versus Baron Corbin versus Sami Zayn versus Chris Jericho. Owens and Jericho have history. Zayn and Owens have history. And Baron Corbin has been a guy that WWE has been high on. So I would put these four guys in the ring together. Fatal four-way match for the US title. I think it would be a hell of a fatal four-way match. We've seen some great fatal four-way matches over the years. I think that this would have the potential to be one of the best. Next up, for the IC title, I would have Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins. Now, this is a match we've seen before, and I would do this differently. The roles would be reversed. You would have Seth Rollins as the babyface and Dean Ambrose as the heel. I would finally pull the trigger on a Dean Ambrose heel turn and make him like Brian Pillman. Make him a real lunatic who is out of control and unpredictable and scary. And Seth Rollins would be the babyface. I think that this would be a very entertaining match with the roles reversed. Different from what we've been seeing over the past few years, because it was, of course, Rollins that initially turned on his Shield brothers. This time you would have Ambrose as the heel going up against the babyface Rollins for the IC title. For the Raw Women's title, Sasha Banks versus Bayley, I would find a way to salvage this whole storyline and maybe even go in a different direction. Maybe have Sasha as the babyface and Bayley as the heel. Maybe take Bayley's character in a different direction. Either way, this is something that has been brewing for a long time, and I would wait a little bit longer and pull the trigger on this at WrestleMania 34 and give it a good solid build-up. Sasha Banks versus Bayley for the Raw Women's title, and let them, again, hold nothing back. This is WrestleMania. Let these two women go out there and try to have the greatest women's match in WWE history. Moving on here for the Raw Tag Team titles. Actually, let me go back and do the SmackDown Women's title. Charlotte versus Becky Lynch. Again, this is something that has been brewing for a while. Charlotte and Becky Lynch have been friends on SmackDown for a while. I would build up for WrestleMania these two going at it. The only way I would change this match is if Ronda Rousey is available for WrestleMania. In that case, I would do the MMA Horsewomen versus the WWE Horsewomen, or do Charlotte versus Ronda Rousey. But if Ronda Rousey is not available, then I would do Charlotte versus Becky Lynch one-on-one for the SmackDown Women's title. Next here, I have the Raw Tag Team titles, the Broken Hardys versus Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman. I would have the Hardys. In a perfect world, by this time, they will be fully broken. They will be able to do their old gimmick again and perhaps do new things with it, take it to new places. And meanwhile, you have Bray Wyatt forming an alliance with Braun Strowman, the two of them reconnecting on Raw. And you have this tag team match between these two dark tag teams, Wyatt and Strowman versus the Broken Hardys for the Raw Tag Team titles. And for the SmackDown Tag Team titles, I would have the Usos as the champions once again, defending against Chad Gable and Shelton Benjamin, who would have returned by this point. I would put Chad Gable and Shelton Benjamin together, let Chad Gable get the rub off of Benjamin. Benjamin takes Gable under his wing, and they challenge for the tag team titles against the Usos. I think that that would help elevate Gable, take him to the next level, and you would have something significant for the tag team titles at WrestleMania. For the Cruiserweight title, and this is one I really like. This is something you might not expect because it does not involve Neville, who has been the Cruiserweight champion in WWE. This would be between Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. This would be the culmination of what happened at the NXT TakeOver Chicago show. I would have Gargano beat Neville for the Cruiserweight title, and then Ciampa comes back in early 2018, and he comes for revenge, or should I say, he just comes to beat up his former partner even more. He's upset that his partner won the Cruiserweight title, and that sets up WrestleMania. Ciampa versus Gargano for the Cruiserweight title one-on-one. Raw versus SmackDown, and this could also be the MMA Horsewomen versus the WWE Horsewomen if Ronda Rousey is getting involved. But I want to have one Raw versus SmackDown match on this show, and I figured this is a way you could get some of the other women involved and have something on the line. I would put maybe the first draft pick in the Superstar Shakeup on the line, or something where the winning brand gets something for winning. Put something on the line in this match so it feels like it's important. I would have a 6-women match, Alexa, Nia Jax, and Emma versus Asuka, Naomi, and Natalya. This would be Asuka's showcase on the main roster, maybe her first match even, if she's not called up by then. But I would definitely have Asuka in this match and have her pick up the win for her team to really get her career going in the right direction, and she gets this big win to gain a lot of momentum on the main roster. So I would have the SmackDown women pick up the victory here with Asuka getting the win for her team. And then I would bring back Money in the Bank at WrestleMania. This would be on Raw. This would be the Raw superstars having their Money in the Bank match with SmackDown having the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. And I would have 6 participants for this match. I would have Jason Jordan, and we'll see where he's at WrestleMania. If the babyface run doesn't work, he would be a heel by this point. Finn Balor, The Miz, Bobby Roode, Cesaro, Sheamus, and Cesaro. I would have Sheamus and Cesaro perhaps broken up by this time, or even have them as a team in this match. You could tease that they're going to work together, but then of course they have a falling out. You could do that as well. As far as who wins this match, Bobby Roode would be in this, so you could potentially have Roode win and get the Money in the Bank briefcase, or if it's too soon for Roode to win, you can have Finn Balor win. Or if Jason Jordan is gaining some momentum, maybe if he's a heel, you could have him win the Money in the Bank briefcase. But you could have a lot of different possibilities in this one. I think that these 6 would have a really solid Money in the Bank ladder match. And then finally, to round it out, the Andre the Giant Battle Royal, and I would have somebody who is on the rise in WWE win that match, and that person would be Big Cass. I would have Cass win the Battle Royal. Makes sense. He's a big guy. The company's trying to build him up as the next big thing, and I think that would be a lot better than Mojo Rawley winning. So I would go with Big Cass to win the Andre the Giant Battle Royal. So that is my card for WrestleMania 34. Leave a comment on NoDQ.com and the YouTube channel. Let me know what you think. That's it. We are all wrapped up here for episode number 1000 of NoDQ video. Thank you guys so much for checking out today's video. If you enjoyed it, please share it. Tell a friend. Reddit, MySpace, Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, any social media site, any wrestling message board, anybody you know who watches wrestling. Let them know about NoDQ video. Send them the link to this video. That is the best way you can support me and the website. Another way you can show your support is pick up a NoDQ.com t-shirt. I will remove this boa so you can see the shirt in full. Head over to ProWrestlingTees.com, search NoDQ, or check out the link in the description box on YouTube or on NoDQ.com. You can pick up an official t-shirt. That is a great way to show your support. You can wear it at wrestling events, and that's another way you can help spread the word about NoDQ.com. Thank you guys. 6 years of NoDQ video, 1,000 episodes. You guys have been very awesome. I appreciate all the support. And that's it. We are done here for NoDQ video. Thank you guys so much. Stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the very latest in the world of wrestling.